I swear never to wear a jacket as long as I live.
I swear never to wear a jacket as long as I live.
I swear to never wear a jacket again for as long as I live.
I swear never to wear a jacket as long as I live. Hello, welcome to another episode of the Horror Vision Presents Elements of Horror. I'm Sean.
I am Anthony.
I am John.
And I'm Missy.
And wow, do we have a movie for you today. Anthony, tell us the movie and the director and why you picked this movie.
The film's name is Deerskin, also known in Germany as Monseigneur Killer Style. That's true. Directed by Quentin Dupieux. And I came across this film on the interwebs many years ago. And eventually it popped up eventually, via streaming on Max. And I sat down and watched it. I think that was like 2019, maybe late 2019, early 2020. It's been a while. And I remember bringing it up on our programming before, just very briefly, but I was hoping to give this film an audience because it's first of all, it's bonkers. And for those not familiar with the director's work, I mean, a lot of us were introduced to him via Rubber. So a lot of folks saw that one early on and remember how ridiculous and just absurd it is. And it's nice to see how that stuff carried over and eventually became this semi-serious project that culminated in Deerskin, where he's actually trying to tell a story that's not completely crazy. But I was immediately enamored by this film, and it was one of those ones that I wanted to share with folks. And I'm glad we're sitting down here doing this today because I don't know anybody that's ever really spoken about it. Like I said, in conversation with Sean earlier this week, I may not sound like it now, but I am completely elated to actually have folks to talk to about with this film because it's been one of those ones that's like a secret favorite for a good long while, and I'm glad we're here doing it today. But yeah, like I said, I heard about it, online, and eventually it got, some streaming, and it kind of came and went, and it's friggin' phenomenal. But yeah, that's how I came about it, and I chose it because I happen to love it. So there.
Can I ask, other than Rubber and this movie, Deerskin, have you seen, so he has other movies. He's got a movie called Wrong Cops that has Marilyn Manson in it, of all people. He's got a movie called Wrong, and I think there's a couple other movies as well.
I've seen Wrong. I have not seen Wrong Cops. I'm actually still waiting on my German copy Blu-ray that's floating around in the ether to eventually show up to me at some point. But I have seen Wrong. That is more wild, out there stuff. It doesn't include a portion of the subject matter here. That's more of his just ridiculous stuff sewn together. But that will definitely get a chuckle out of you. Actually, I was watching that one last night, and it still holds up because I think that one came out in 2012. So he's been at it for quite a while and does have a current film career that he's working on right now. He still does put out films. So this is the third film that I've seen from him.
You said he's like a DJ or something?
He is a DJ. He was actually involved in the early dubstep movement in France and Europe, starting back in the early 2000s. I remember watching one of his random videos that popped up on like 120 Minutes late night on MTV one evening. I can't remember the name of the song exactly, but His stage name is Mr. Wazo, I believe, which translates to like Mr. Bird. And it's just this, again, you know, he directed, and it's just this crazy like hand puppet that's, you know, bouncing to the beat. And every time it goes into some sort of, you know, faster paced beat, that he just make the hand puppet, you know, head bang all crazy. But it was just like, again, like just more weird shit that I was exposed to, you know, way back, and not knowing that he was going to eventually, you know, develop a film career,
Right.
in direction anyway. But yeah, so he still is very current and active in that scene as well. So he still does a lot of electronic and dance style music to this day, on top of film direction.
So Missy, you saw Rubber years ago at a film fest. I know that. So other than that and this, have you seen anything else that he's done?
No, but Anthony was telling me about Wrong the other day, so I wanted to check that one out. But just Rubber,
Okay.
and I was rewatching Rubber earlier, and it still holds up.
I need to see that. John, have you seen any other Quentin Dupieux movies?
No, no. I
Oh.
mean, I'm only familiar with the cast.
Okay. Okay. So you like myself, this was your inauguration.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Talk about your experience watching this film, John.
Yeah, I mean, there's two films that came to mind, neither of which are films that I find really all that good, but it kind of reminded me of them anyway. First film is Tim Burton's version of Sweeney Todd. And another film that came to mind is a film from the early 80s called Eating Raoul. And it reminded me of those two films just because of kind of just sort of the whole absurdity and just darkly comedic value of mixing like the elements of the slasher film with, you know, just this total ne'er-do-well that, you know, is just just obsessed with making like just the perfect stylish outfit. And just really the whole concept of taking a fan, like a ceiling fan blade, and turning it into a machete. You just was like, okay, yeah, this has like Eating Raoul all over it.
So the basic premise of this movie for the listeners, and obviously this is Elements of Horror is a full discussion, so we're going to go spoiler, but at the same time, I don't necessarily feel like knowing everything about this movie will take away from it. However, I will tell you, I didn't know anything about this. I expected the tone, but you know, I mean, a good 20 minutes into the movie, I was like, okay, it's fine, but why did he pick this for Elements of Horror? I'm assuming it's going to get like dark, and I mean, it's already like borders on dark, but and then like the ceiling fan, and maybe my favorite scene in the movie is where it cuts from him holding the ceiling fan and then to the car where it's so distant and you just see the sparks as he's driving down the street with the door open, sharpening the ceiling fan blade on the road. I thought that was one of the funniest. The edit, the way that they get there is just, it's very, it's a microcosm of the film's macrocosm for sure. And then all hell breaks loose. But so be warned, listener, we're gonna go all in. You can listen, or you can. I mean, I'm recommending the fuck out of this movie, and I also know so it's not on anything right now. I had to rent it for $3.99. Totally fucking worth it, by the way. But also, it's $10.80 on Amazon, the Blu-ray. So I mean, it's a no-brainer. If you're listening, you buy it, you hate it, I'll send you $11 and you can send it to me or whatever. I don't know. And again, a prepaid envelope. Missy, talk about, so and when you watched this, you didn't realize until today it was the same directors as Rubber. So talk about your experience watching this movie, Deerskin, the other day for the first time.
Yeah, I went in completely blind. I didn't know anything about it, and I didn't realize I knew the director until much later today. And I watched this first a few days ago. Um, and what really hit me with it is that the whole movie is about building armor. This guy isn't happy with his life, and he acquires this deerskin jacket that he bonds with, and he's trying to create he wants to be somebody else. He's creating a new persona and building armor to protect him through from the world. And I've never seen a movie that was focused on that, and like, that's a theme that's very close to my heart. I'm covered with tattoos that I consider to be armor to protect me from the world. So it hit me. Probably about halfway through. I mean, I think it was on the back burner, but there's a specific scene where I realized what he was doing, and I thought it was fucking brilliant.
John, can you riff off that?
Yeah, it's just sort of like the personification and sacralizing of the jacket. I think Missy touches on it. It's like it's his armor, but I love how it just speaks to him and just calls him George. And
George,
this is really kind of like something. It's like a cross between like something Davy Crockett would wear, but it's also like something you would find on some kind of like obscure 60s vinyl album cover.
yes, very well said. I mean, it's in the bottom of that guy's trunk. He pays almost $8,000 for it.
It's almost $8,000 to. So for those that haven't seen the film, so Julie Delpy's dad is like this sort of old guy with this antique jacket who sells it to our main character, and he pretty much just sort of he's going through a divorce. This is like an irresponsible impulse purchase, and he's essentially just his finances are cut off as a result of that.
Anthony.
No, I love how he goes to seek isolation and to kind of like recollect himself. And I don't feel that he's trying to reestablish himself, because even in talking to his jacket, when the first conversation I think he has with it as he's walking home at night and is propositioned by a woman who did pornography 40 years or 20 years ago, it was like, yeah, I'll be in your porno. But he's talking to himself, and he mentions, he's like, why did you say that? You're a director. Why did you say those things? Like, it's just like it's like a bad pickup line. And so he's arguing back and forth with himself. So yeah, that's the other portion. That's the other like element to the film, is that there's a slow, well, actually maybe not even slow, but there's a descent into madness with our main character, George, who clearly has something wrong with him and has probably, created issues in his marital life and has caused his, him having to leave where he's at. We don't really get that full story. There's a lot of little small elements that are touched on and never really fully revisited. Especially in this short film, because the runtime's only an hour 17.
Mm-hmm.
And for the listeners, it's not a long film, so it's not a really large chunk of time you're going to spend with these characters. But like I said, I found it odd how he went to this town seeking solitude and then completely I don't know if it's hubris or just I don't know, crazy character traits where he decides to develop this persona that's much larger than what he actually is. Maybe it's midlife crisis, who knows? And I mean, obviously that was one of his wacky decisions that led him to buy this wildly out of fashion jacket. And, you know,
that doesn't fit him, by the way.
It doesn't fit him. It's like a bare midriff.
$8,000.
Yeah, it's like a bare midriff. But yeah, it's like a total screw you to his ex-wife, where it's just like, well, guess what? I'm going to spend some of our savings on some bullshit. It's so odd. And then we meet our secondary character or co-star, Denise, played by Adele. Forgive me, I'm having trouble pronouncing her last name. I think she was in a Portrait of a Woman on Fire, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and she's spectacular. And that's the thing about this film that has a draw to it, is it's played straight by every actor that's in the film. It's intentionally hilarious, but it's like the line delivery from the actors. It's like, again, it's so straight, but the content that they're talking about is completely just fucking ridiculous. Even going into his filmmaking style, that's the other thing that we get when he purchases the jacket. The guy's like, "Oh, not only are you the proud new owner of this jacket, but you get this brand new state-of-the-art, you know, digital handycam," which is not state-of-the-art.
Not even fucking close.
It's a total piece of shit. And you know, he kind of bites off more than he can chew by, you know, introducing himself as a director to our other character, to Denise, because she ends up actually she knows film editing. She went to school for film editing, but she's a bartender in the small town. And, you know, eventually she kind of sees through his bullshit and is just like, you know, I'll finance what you have going on, but you need to keep feeding me the goods. And that's where you start to see, you know, George's downturn, like where he starts to really go fucking off the deep end. And that's where the fan blade comes in.
Well, no, so actually, no, the fan blade comes in before that. So she actually...
That's right. You're right.
I want to leave it. So the one thing let's not say how the movie ends and the ultimate fate, but
yeah,
we could talk about everything up to and around that. But so she actually comes up with a large amount of money and then basically says, no, I'm going to take over production. I'm going to, like, you need to be guided. I've known you've been full of shit all along, which is that's a nice, because you're like, from the beginning, like, she's just giving him money, and you're like, and you know, remember, she's like, oh, I edited the footage that you got me. It wasn't easy, but, you know, I made a scene. He's like, you watch what I filmed? So he clearly has no idea. Or where she's like, I put Pulp Fiction back together in, you know, chronological order, and he's like, what kind of special machine? Like, so he calls it he's like, you know, you're hired as creditor.
Right, not editor.
But she's like a special machine, a computer.
Yeah, a computer like everyone else.
Has. Yeah.
But so I posit that this guy, George, we don't know. All we know is that he's driving, right? We don't know why. He hates his jacket. That's the first thing we see. Is he stops for gas. He's looking at his jacket. He flushes it. Well, like, as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, you used to shop at Borders Torrance, because we would have people try to flush large pieces of clothing. So I was like, okay. But then he goes and gets this jacket, and then he just drives until he reaches a very small town, checks into a bed and breakfast with no money. Just like the weirdest. No, I don't want to say he employs bravado. He's a liar. I don't think he's a pathological liar, but the point of me extrapolating all of these events at the beginning of the film is to say the only clue we have is before he goes into the bar when he meets Denise, he calls what we assume is his wife, soon to be ex-wife, and he says, it's done, I'm gone. And he says, do you want to know where? And she's like, you're nowhere, you don't exist. And he throws the phone away when she hangs up on him, right? So he has essentially recognized the fact that I am a blank slate upon which I can create anything. My old life is now gone. It's not an option. So I can become whatever I want. But he also has, like, middle-age narcissists like, but I don't want to work for anything, so I'm just going to, like fake it till I make it, I guess you could almost, but I think it goes beyond even that because he has no intention of really doing anything other than what he's doing. That even goes down to the fact that like when they come upon this thing, him and the jacket, which I wanted to point out, when he starts talking to the jacket, I feel like you get a little bit of his previous life because so the scene he's reading, right? And the jacket's like, George. He's like, I'm reading. Can we talk about it later? George. And then he kind of like stops reading, takes off his glasses and sets them down and pinches the bridge of his nose. He's like, yes. It's exactly the way that he spoke to his wife. I guarantee you that's the relationship he had with his wife in a nutshell right there, right? I mean, it's so fucking obvious upon second watch. But then so he's like, it's like he's recreating a relationship the wrong way and then realizes it. And so the jacket actually, because they have this conversation, and since he's speaking for both, at some point you can only infer who's talking. But he says, well, one of them says we'll be partners, and then he says, but I'm in charge. And the first time I saw it, I took it one way. The second time I saw it, the jacket is the one saying I'm in charge. That's what changes it from being just another recreation of the relationship with his wife, right?
He is somebody who like makes like just these like terrible yet hilarious impulsive decisions that just somehow kind of work out until they don't.
Yes.
Like, he's like getting stared down by this mute kid, and then just later just hurls a brick at him. and then like has to go, like he uses his wedding ring as a collateral, which is like because he doesn't have any cash to stay at this, bed and breakfast, which is fine, and then like, that's kind of at first you're thinking, that's part of his character. He's like shedding his identity. Oh, by the way, the guy who has your collateral died. You have to go get it.
Go upstairs and lick his finger to remove the ring. but it is sheer, like he's just going to do whatever he does. He's not going to do any work for it. He just wants the world to conform to him, probably because it didn't in his previous life, right? And so that even so when the jacket's like, my dream is to be the only jacket, and then George is like, well, my dream is to be the only person wearing a jacket, so let's start making this dream a reality, which becomes the focus of their quote unquote film. But even to the point where when he approaches strangers for the first time, he says things like, will you take off your jacket? And they're like, no. And he's like, I know it seems goofy to you, but it's important to me. Like he's just imposing his will and his, like, the world revolves around me. You might not understand it, but I understand it. So therefore you should conform to what I want. I mean, Missy, how do you think that plays into, or does it, like the armor? Like, where does the armor come in with that?
Oh, I mean, the thing I was thinking about with the jacket too is it all mental illness, or is the jacket also like a cursed object or something? Because the first guy who had it, like he wanted to get rid of it. He had it locked away in a chest under a whole bunch of bullshit. And then when he gives it to him, he tells him, I wore it for a year and it went out of fashion, so I put it away.
Mm-hmm.
But like, he wants to get rid of it. George he's short like $200, and he still says, just please take it. Here, have the camera too. And then when he's talking to it, I mean, he's speaking out loud for both parts. So, then that makes you think, oh, well, maybe it's all just his delusion. But then there are a couple instances, like the ending that we're not going to mention, that kind of leans into it too, that made me think maybe there's more to it than just his own psychosis. Or maybe it's both. And the funny thing about the kid with the brick, I thought that kid was in his head.
Oh.
When it happened, until later on. Until we get confirmation it's real. Because the other person who was with him didn't react to him throwing the brick at the kid at all.
True.
So I thought he wasn't there.
Yeah, he was complaining about getting shorted. That's all he was complaining about.
Right, that's all he
Which
cared
is-
about was that he got
Yeah.
short money. And he didn't even blink that he threw a brick at like a special needs kid, which so I thought it was in his head. And I mean, so I was looking at the jacket as like it could be a cursed object. He's also creating armor to protect himself from the world, and he's trying to build like an entire suit and getting all the pieces. He's acquiring all the pieces through different experiences, one piece at a time. But then he's also having full conversations with it. So he went away to this desolate place to be alone, but then he starts talking to the jacket like it's a companion. So, I mean, maybe I'm just reading too much into it, or, maybe the director intended that. I don't know. But so I'm kind of split on how I feel about it. The jacket itself, rather. Because the way it ends makes me think that it's not only in his head, although a lot of it.
Yeah, can I just tell you that Kirsten, she loved this movie, and she offered something that blew me the fuck away because it was nowhere's even. I would have never gotten to this place with it. She's like, and it was largely, as we talked about it after she said it was based on like what you're talking around at the ending about, there's a certain thing that makes you think maybe he wasn't nuts, but she's like, so it's 100% deerskin. Do you think that the jacket is actually got like the soul of the deer and it's convincing him to go kill people because people kill deers to wear their, and I was like, holy fuck. Like, I don't necessarily subscribe to that, although I think the film is perfectly made so that when you could just lay an explanation on top, it'll match up in certain places, it won't, and then you could peel it off and put another one on, same thing. So it's very, very good for that. But I don't know, Anthony, do you have a favorite or like a go-to understanding for what we're talking about with the jacket and George and what it is or how it affects him? Or
I just think it's mental illness, honestly. However, I do see what Missy's saying about how he's trying to complete this suit of armor. As far as its protection goes, we'll talk about that. Oh, actually, we won't. But yeah, I honestly, I see the reasoning behind his actions to be mental illness, and you watch that as he's trying to spruce up his filmmaking by adding things that he could ultimately never afford. And but then I started to think about it again. It's like, well, what was it technically that made him snap and decide that basically filming murders that he's committing is like is acceptable behavior in society? And I don't know if that's just because he's kind of moved to the outskirts of society where maybe stuff like that is, I don't know, acceptable or seen as a norm as far as, eye for an eye culture. But I don't, yeah, I kind of just saw it as him losing his mind little by little, and the extremities of his actions, gaining more weight and momentum as the film goes on. But yeah, I mean that's just kind of my take on that. So I thought the acquisition of I would even call the deerskin jacket like sacred items. Like the acquisition of the sacred items are interesting because like you see him shedding his moral compass, if he even ever had one, in order to gain these items together. So it's much like John said earlier, how he sheds one personality for the coming of the new. You see, what he's willing to do, which more often than not is cheating people to get this new persona. John, please.
John, interpretation on the jacket and its how it manifests or its relationship with George.
I kind of, maybe to synthesize Anthony and Missy's points. Yeah, it's like it is sort of kind of a suit of armor that's sort of like this psychological metamorphosis he's making as he's trying to run away from society. And like whatever kind of cover that he has to do, whether it's like, oh, I'm just making a film, which in and of itself becomes this sort of like meta critique about film and media creation, just in and of itself. I mean, that was kind of apparent early on. And he's never able to complete it. He's just sort of, I mean, I'm not going to get into, how or why that kind of manifests, but it kind of is really sort of part and parcel of his personality, that he's just sort of somebody, who like dreams big, but just can never do and can never complete tasks. And even if it is something where he's going to take on the persona and maybe become, that of a deer, which is coming to life anyway, or he's just projecting himself onto the jacket and the jacket is just speaking back to him.
Yeah. I mean, I think metamorphosis is key. And if it was just the jacket, right, it would have changed. The movie wouldn't be what it is, because as he keeps acquiring pieces, the boots, the pants, the gloves, his behavior is changing. I think the thing that makes him, so Anthony, to your point about or your question as to why he thinks it's fine to just go kill people, I think it goes back to he's the lead character in the world. Everybody else is just in his movie, I think, is kind of, and that goes to even the way that he's shooting the scenes that he gives her. It's like he's like filming himself driving or like filming his arm with the fridge. Like he's just he has been destroyed by another person, so he is now in the process of this transformation. And but the other thing, though, I feel like the first person he approaches coming out of the cinema, so he has paid people to take off their jackets and he drives away with them, which is fucking hysterical. But then he approaches a person leaving the cinema, and he does pull off a nice tracking shot as the jacket compliments him later. It is quite nice. It's pretty steady for driving and fucking filming him with one hand out the window. But the guy's like, says something like, "You'd have to kill me to get me to take off my jacket," or whatever. And it's after that he has the idea, right? And then it's the idea that when he hands her a couple cassettes, when he gives her that cassette, it's in an envelope with his picture sketched on it. So he's handing it to her in a completely different way. He's not there for her to he's not present when she sees it. But she comes to him and she says, "I love this." And I think that's what gives him the license to okay, well, fuck, then I'm going to keep going. And then she goes as far as say, "I need you to be closer. I need more blood." Now, John, do you think Denise knows that he's actually killing people, or do you think that she's just stupid or kidding herself, some plausible deniability that this is some kind of an effect?
She doesn't strike me as a character that's that oblivious and is that out to lunch on what's going on. I think because she knows he's full of shit. She knows that I think she knows full well that what she's doing. It's just like I think the comedic and ironic turn here is that she just finds it genius performance art.
Yeah, okay, well said. Anthony, what do you think? Do you think she knows?
Oh, she absolutely knows. And much to what John said, like she said and admitted to in the film, "I knew you were full of shit, from day one." So she knew he had no budget to create anything like that. So it's got to be real. And let's say she's got a snuff fetish. She, you know, kind of gives him the gusto to go out and go do more, and says like, hey, you know, and he doesn't want to. He's not prepared to do it, because when he leaves her that final tape, he says, you know, I've run out of funding. This is probably the last tape you're going to get, because I'm pretty sure the small bit of rationale he has left is telling him, now you need to flee. You've murdered people. You need to get the fuck out of here. And when she tells him what she tells him, it kind of gives him license to continue on doing what he does. And at that point in the film, when it makes that turn, that's where it's like, holy fuck. Because that's when all the wackadoo shit starts happening. And again, it's like, I love the fashion in which it's done. And obviously, and I mean, just to say, like, when he goes full slasher, like, that's the element of horror, and that's why.
Yeah, right. Yes. Yeah.
For the listeners, he goes full slasher, and it's done really well. Like, there's one kill where he, you know, a woman stopped. He just finished.
Oh, it's the best kill.
Somebody.
It's the best fucking kill.
We're gonna go into it right now, and he's stuffing, you know, the jackets, because that's his keepsake. He takes the jackets of those he murders and stuffs them in his trunk, and there's a funny scene with a backhoe burying them later. But this woman who happens upon him, you know, is like, "Hey, I'm completely lost. Is there any way you can give me some direction?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, sure." But he comes walking up in the traditional slasher, holding a knife, you know, imposing stature and imposing, you know, advancement toward her. And this is, you know, in any normal film that doesn't have these, you know, ridiculous elements to it, this is where you're immediately scared and you hit the gas and you take the fuck off. You don't hang around out of politeness to find out what's going to happen next. And he walks up and just right through the top of the fucking the roof of the car. And I'm like, oh, that's a really cool shot. And then you're not expecting it to pan down to the next part where you see her head impaled, and you know, there's gore and there's blood pouring down, and just nonchalantly, you know, let me get this door open and let's get this jacket off her real quick. Like, it's absolutely insane. And it goes on from there. There's more, you know, victims throughout the evening, and you see some more of his antics, and he's filming it all. And again, because this movie moves so quickly and at the pace of it, again, this is something where it's like, damn, I'd kind of like to see more than that. So they cram a big body count into, you know, maybe a 3-minute segment.
But it never feels rushed. It never, ever feels rushed.
Not at all. Mm-hmm. Not at all. But again, it's one of those things where what's so interesting about the filmmaker is where he's, you know, again, you know, just kind of touching the tip of the iceberg on all these different subjects, and then never going back to them and just moving on. But that's the element of wonder that it leaves you with. Yeah. And that's what I loved about the film, because I was constantly left thinking about, like, well, what happened next? Yeah. But and again, that kind of just rolls into this crazy ass scene with a backhoe and him paying this dude off and just saying, I want you to just dig a big hole right here. No questions asked. And then leave. And the guy's like, sure, takes the cash. Right. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, at some point you got to be asking yourself, well, there's a bunch of dead people all over town. Like, bodies are piling up. This is something that, you know, you think in a small, tiny knit community would be, you know, huge cause for alarm. Nobody ever says shit, which is fucking weird to me.
So I want to come back to that point, actually, but before we do, Missy, do you feel like Denise knows or doesn't know? What's your take on that?
Oh, I think she totally knows.
Okay.
In the scene where she tells him that she she knows it's all bullshit, and she's known since the beginning. The camera then pauses and they really look at each other. Like, she really sees him, but she doesn't reject what she sees. She tells him that, we're alone, but we can be alone together. So she knows, and she gives him the last two pieces of the armor.
Yeah.
So she gives him the pants and the gloves.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that it's the first time that through the whole movie, she's also been alone and an outcast, and like, I think this is the first time she's meeting somebody that she connects with, that, like, she thinks they're the same. She wants to be part of his world.
So that's the same scene where she brings the money, right? She's all of a sudden got all this money from her father selling his store. And she's like, I'm taking control. I'm going to be producer. You need to be guided. I've known it's all bullshit. Like, there's even an exchange previous to that where she's like, oh, I got an advance from my boss. He's like, I'm your boss. She's like, no, at the bar. And he's like, oh, once again, going back to him, like, I'm the only person in the world. You're all just a sporting character.
Yeah.
I think once she does that, I think when he writes her that thing, that the first time he gives her a tape with killing on it, I don't think he's thinking, I need to get the fuck out of here. I think he's saying, he's being all like, this may be the last one because I don't have funding. Because he's like, I want more money. Like, I really think it's all just, and I think in some way, it's not only that he thinks that he's the center of the world, but I also think he drove far enough out from a city because he thinks like, well, these people are all fucking rubes. And I mean, I don't know. He might be right, because just like there's no police, there's nothing, there's there's all these dead people, yeah. And there's nothing that we see. Now maybe Dupieux just doesn't show it to us. That's very possible, but you would think it would be almost impossible for that to be happening in so small a place and there not be something, right? But to finalize this thought, so she says, I'm taking over, and he immediately says, well, I want gloves. Almost like to gain some modicum of power back. She gets him the gloves. Then he's like, okay, we're going to continue the shoot. They drive out to the middle of nowhere, and he's like, film me. So now he's having her film. And what does he do? He just goes out and starts running around and spinning, because now he doesn't want to give her what she wants. So he's changing the entire now the project is like not going to be what she thought it was going to be. So I think that, like, if it had gone on from that point, I think they would have, bumped heads, because I don't think he wants, I think Missy's right. Denise is looking like, oh, we're alone together. Like, I can relate to this person. And I think he's like, I can relate to my jacket. I don't want to relate to anyone else. Like, I'm using you because I need you. But other than that, I'm not interested. So I don't know. Anybody, am I nuts?
No, I love that they're in close proximity for a long period of time, and that they didn't try to push like a romantic angle. It was purely, business oriented.
Yep. Like
100% all the way through. So yeah, I agree with you, where the only thing that he cares about is, his fringe jacket and completing his armor.
Hey, killer style.
Killer, Monsignor killer style.
So I wanted to go back to the tractor. He pays this man, as Anthony said, to use his tractor to dig a giant hole. And it's not really a giant hole, a large hole. No questions asked. The guy's fine with it. And then when the guy drives away, he backs the car up, opens the trunk, and starts throwing. And as a viewer, you don't know if he's keeping the bodies or not, right? The jackets are in the trunk. Another reason why there has to be, like, he's not even cleaning up after himself. So there's literally bodies everywhere, right? Like, essentially. And he takes the jackets, not only throws them in the hole, but he does like the whole trope where it's like he takes the fucking shovel and like beats, like as if it's like another movie where they're dumping bodies and one is still alive and they have to beat it to death to finish it off. I mean, what do you guys, Missy, starting with you, what do you think is the whole thing like, I want to be the only jacket, I want to be the only guy wearing a jacket? What is that? I mean, I read it as like, that's him saying nobody else matters but me. I'm the main character, but like, I don't know. Give me thoughts on the whole obsession with wanting to eliminate all other jackets in the world.
I think he's seeing them as other people's personas. So he wants to be the strongest one. He wants to be special. He doesn't want to feel ordinary. He wants to feel special and be the only one. And I think that each person's jacket is like representing the image they show to the world. Like how they wanted to present themselves, the person they created. So he's trying to, I guess, be the dominant personality. But that's what I thought the jackets were representing identity.
I buy that
And
100%.
he does not want to be ordinary.
He couldn't be ordinary if he tried. John, what do you think? Do you have a read on his relationship with other people's jackets?
It's sort of one of those things where, like, if I can't have it, nobody can, kind of situation. So it's like, I want to be like the only guy who has the cool jacket in town. Everyone else's jackets, no, fuck that. They're going in the ditch. They're going in the toilet.
Unsuccessfully. Anthony, you have a read on George's relationship with other people's jackets?
And I felt for almost a moment that he felt that they were undeserving of having them because of how quickly they were willing to offer them up.
Ooh.
So, and in that regard, it's like, well, yeah, then not only do I deem myself, this high above you and that I don't believe you should even have them, but because you're willing to sacrifice them so quickly for, $100 or what have you, then, you're not worthy of having them at all. So, but then again, that's how I thought about it the first time I saw it a couple of years ago. But then obviously upon a rewatch, it's one of those things where it's like, no, they weren't selling them to him. They weren't really necessarily even offering them up. It was just for the role. And then he ripped them off. Remember, he just drove off with all their shit.
Right.
So, yeah.
So funny.
So that kind of negates that. But yeah, another ridiculous element to the film. And in all honesty, I mean, that's kind of what it goes back as far as like the absurdism in his movies. Like, we could go on and on about what we think it is, and the truth is really that it's just like, what's the weirdest fucking thing I can think of, and let's execute it. And that's what he did. So I don't know, but I like that we're able to still have the discussion about trying to interpret the insanity. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Well, and I like that he's putting himself up on this pedestal, but it's not even for something that he's doing. It's not like, I want to make the greatest film anyone has ever seen. It's, I want to be the only person wearing a jacket.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was caught in a lie, and he doesn't even want to do the job. He doesn't even want to make the film, and then it comes back to when she's like bribing him with, check this out, I got you these cool pants. And then when she says what she actually wants from him, then he's like, all right, give me more. I want, give me the gloves. And then we can go from there, and I'll go do some more of your bidding and some of your dirty work. Because I don't think he has any intention of going out and, filming snuff. I think it's just something that happened on accident. Again, and it goes back to the point I made earlier about how I think that initial killing tape was supposed to be the last, because I think he was going to flee. But the thought of being able to get more killer gear, I think is far more enticing than, I don't know, the law. So he continued on doing what he was doing until whatever happens. But again, I liked your comment earlier about how there's no police presence whatsoever. It's like, yeah, I don't know. This town is so fucking bizarre in that everybody is so awesome at looking the other way. Even when he comes home from his night of like butchery, because the first night he goes out and he kills and he gets blood on his jacket, so he's kind of pissed off, scrubbing his jacket because he's got a blood stain on it. So he learns from that, and the next time he goes out, he has like a poncho on to make sure that protects his stuff, so he doesn't have to worry about blood stains or anything like that. And I just love that scene that he's got this neighbor that's not quite annoying and hasn't really had any interaction with, but sees him coming in and just like, she's wearing a fucking jacket.
Yep.
And then marches upstairs, boots her fucking door, and kills her off screen. It's hysterical. And you see him walking out with this face of disgust on, and not because of what he just did, but he's like pinching the jacket in his fingers. That is fucking ridiculous. I don't know, man. This movie's fucking all over the place for such a small amount of time. And that's like my one complaint about it, is that it's, I feel like there's so many ideas that are realized but not fully realized. But again, it just adds to this film's wonder.
Agreed. John, thoughts on anything?
One film I forgot to mention, I guess earlier, that came to mind with the jacket was Little Shop of Horrors. It's kind of like the plant.
Ooh.
We're trying to. It's like, he's feeding the plant. He's feeding. He's offering. These deaths become an offering to, this tiki god.
I like that.
Yeah.
BBC more.
I like that too.
Well said, John.
And I think Kirsten was right on about the deer spirit. I was thinking that too, because we get flashes of the deer through the whole movie. I did look. I have this book on animal totems, called Animals Speak by Ted Andrews, and I did look up the deer because I didn't know that one offhand. And according to that book, it represents safety, strength, protection, intuition, and innocence. And I think that a lot of those themes run through the movie. I mean, because George himself, even up to the point where he starts killing people, like, he's very naive about everything. Like, he starts telling stories about this movie he's going to make. Has he never even seen a movie?
I know, right?
Like, he thought she was going to edit his movie but not watch it. Like, how is that even possible? And I think he's definitely channeling strength from the deer, because as he starts getting more pieces of his armor, he feels more confident, and he keeps getting bolder with each piece he gets. I think that he's doing it to protect himself from the world, and that's even how Denise reads it when she sees his last tape and comes to him and says, I think the real subject is your jacket, and it represents how people are hiding behind the shell to protect themselves from the outside world. And I love that scene.
Sean, I had a question for you. You said that this film was $10 online right now?
So I looked again a moment ago, and Amazon does this. If you look at something and don't buy it, the next time you look at it, it might be less money, it might be a little bit more. So it is no longer $10, it's 11 something. And also, it is not like noted as Prime, and it is a Region 2. It's a Region B/2.
Okay, so that's the one that I have, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm still going to buy it because I have the region free player. But for a lot of people that will not work. So this movie really needs a fucking proper release that it's probably not going to get. I mean, maybe at some point some boutique company would do it. I would hope. But I mean, it's nice that it's there. So if you're a region free player, there you go. But yeah, unfortunately, I mean, there's a DVD as well for, I mean, $9, which you might as well just pay the extra $2.50 and get the Blu-ray. But also, I think the DVD is also region B. So this, you know, Americans, I don't think there's a demand. But hopefully we can help cultivate one, because I feel like definitely nobody should go into this movie expecting a horror movie. Like I said, when I was first watching it, I had a feeling it was going to get there somewhere, but the tone is just such that I was like, is it? But it is fucking delightful. I mean, I have had a consistent kind of the last couple days, I've wanted to watch something, but I don't know what I like. I've been watching TV and, you know, like, I mean, nothing super mundane, but nothing, you know, I was like watching Happy, the sci-fi show, which is fucking delightful. I've actually been watching like some random animation stuff like Love, Death, and Robots and whatnot. And there was like, I want something with a little more sustenance. I want a film, but I would try, like, I was sick earlier in the week and I was up late. So I was like trying some older movies, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to judge this fairly right now, because I think I want something modern, but I don't know what I know the experience I want. I want the experience when I sat down and watched, like, and not to compare this movie to them, but like May or Collateral or, you know, I don't know, any number of modern movies that, regardless of genre or specification or creator, like sucked me in, made me say, I need to buy that now. Like, I just watched it, I need to buy it. That is not something that happens so much anymore, because everything is just, you know, at your fingertips, right? But like early 2000s, when my friend Dennis would show me a movie and I loved it, there was no streaming. So like I'd watch a movie like on a Thursday night after working at the bar with him, and then wake up Friday morning and drive to Best Buy and buy it. Because I'd be like, well, I may not watch it again for a month or two, but I have to own, I have to physically possess this. I wanted something like that. And this was it.
If you can't find it on disc, you can buy it digitally for $10, because on Prime you can either rent it for $3.99 or you can just buy it for $9.99, which is what I did, because I knew that I was going to watch it at least twice anyways.
Missy, did you also say that Wrong was on Prime also? Is that for is there a fee for that, or is that?
No, it was free. I believe it was. I think it was Prime I saw it on.
Okay.
Wrong
cool.
was on Prime and Rubber was on Max.
Gotcha.
I will say Prime is increasingly pissing me off, because you have to be very careful. I mean, not like they'll say, like, you know, you can watch this, but a lot of their content has shifted to Freevee, and it pisses me off, because it's like, I don't want ads. Sometimes it's fine, but like I don't want to ever, like, if I can help it, I don't want ads. So I wish it was a little bit more clear when, you know, it's when you're clicking on something like, oh, this is free to you, because that used to mean it's included with Prime. Now it might mean, well, it's free to you with commercials on Freevee. It really, really fucking bothers me.
The only thing more annoying than that is watching a movie on terrestrial TV, and then when like the end credits roll and you're like in the emotion, they just squash it to one side and give you the.
I don't like that.
I don't like that either.
Closing thoughts, John.
Pleasantly surprised by this film. Short and sweet, could have been longer, even could have opened up a little more and had more room to breathe, and I would have liked it just the same.
Were you content with the ending? Without saying what it is, were you content with it? Were you like, that works? Or
hell yes, I was.
Missy, final thoughts?
Just that if you like unique stories and you want to see something different, give this a try. Don't go into it with any expectations, because it's not going to be what you think it is. But it's very much its own story. It's got very good performances, and it was an extremely enjoyable film.
Were you cool with the ending, or did you want more?
I love the ending.
Okay.
In fact, once we're done recording, I want to ask you guys what you thought about it.
Okay. Anthony, final thoughts?
Final thoughts. This movie has held up since I saw it last. I agree that I would have liked to have seen more film. I had honestly forgotten the runtime on it. And yeah, I would have loved to see more in this, little bonkers reality he created. But yeah, very, very, very effective and very thought provoking. It's great fucking film, and like I said, I'm starting to explore more of his film library, and excited to see a lot more of the stuff that I've missed over the years. So I'm very happy with it, and I'm happy that you guys enjoyed yourselves with it as well.
What did the ending work for you?
Yeah, because I think it was apt. I think we'll talk about that later, but yeah, I think it was apt.
Okay. My final thought is just killer style. It says it all. And I adored the ending. It was unexpected, and I would also tell people, if you watch this, if you can not pause it at all, especially in the last half hour, don't, because you'll see the runtime and it'll let you know where you are. I always the ideal experience watching a movie is where you sit down from start to finish and there's no distractions and you don't pause it or whatever. But obviously it's an imperfect world, and that's harder and harder. So, but yeah, so that's Quentin Dupieux's Deerskin. I think that is a unanimous recommendation from everyone here on Elements of Horror. And am I next?
It's your.
Yeah,
You're
I think
not.
you're up next.
So I watched for the second time, and I mentioned to either Missy or Anthony in a text. Are you guys familiar with a movie called The Gray with Liam Neeson?
Mm-hmm.
Heard of it.
So that is my pick. I watched it a week or two ago, and it's one of those movies I wanted to see it in the theater. I didn't, and I watched it a couple of years ago for the first time on Anthony's recommendation. Well, you kind of brought it, but you kind of lit the fire under my ass to see it again, and I just rewatched it, and I just wish I'd seen it in the fucking theater so bad. But so listeners, if you want to read along, as I always say, that'll be our next movie on Elements of Horror. But until then,
I'm scumbag Anthony.
I'm George.
I'm John.
And I'm still just Missy.
And yeah, killer style.
A pandemic of violence floods the streets of major cities as cases of the media-dubbed murder virus, MV20 soar, causing those infected to go on killing sprees. Caught in the middle, police detective Angela Miller finds her only trustworthy ally in the self-proclaimed psychic PI, Gerald Henry. As the two try to navigate the violence, they are drawn into New Age guru Abramelin Harvest's plot to heal the planet. Harvest's missive?
The world is sick, and humanity is the infection.
The cure? Murder. From the twisted mind of Sean C. Baker, author of A Collection of Desires and Shadowplay Book 1, Kim and Jesse, comes his most vicious novel yet, Murder Virus.